Hello and welcome. Today we have Dr. Laura Adams, who is a licensed clinical psychologist who works at the School of American Ballet at Lincoln Center and sees patients in private practice in Brooklyn, New York. Welcome, Laura.
Thank you for having me.
So we're going to kick it off with some questions that I hope you have the answers to. They should be right in your wheelhouse. Um, Starting off, why did you get into psychology? What's your personal journey, and what's kept you curious, or what's exciting for you now about the field?
My attention has always been drawn to human psychology, our development towards well-being, our relationships, and this topic is such a large container, and I've
Mm.
been
Yeah.
working in the field for over 15 years, and so it's been able to really evolve alongside my interests. Um, Currently, I am most interested right in this moment with the process of unlearning. I think as we gain more and more information about health and well-being and become so saturated in that information, I think both phases are really useful. The phase where we are learning a lot about ourselves, adopting frameworks to understand ourselves better, trying to improve our wellness and health. And then at the same time, I think there's another phase that's really interesting where we begin to sort of allow ourselves to um, unlearn all of that rigidity,
Mm.
allow ourselves to sort of shed the need to constantly be learning and always kind of optimizing and allowing ourselves to really just sit in our own naturalness and humanity. I think both are so valuable.
Mhm.
Um, but I'm really interested in how do we not let our conceptions of ourselves and others become so rigid now that all of this information is so readily available. So that's something I'm thinking a lot about.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking as you were talking. I was like, yeah, we're basically drinking from this fire hose of information
Right.
constantly. And it's like sometimes maybe turn it off. Like maybe it's okay to find ways to connect with it and disconnect from it.
Yes, we connect and we learn so much about ourselves, and that is so valuable. And then we mature, and then we
Mhm.
can let ourselves just move forward from there and not always be on that kind of path forever. It can ebb and flow over time.
Yeah. All right. So you work with a bunch of ballet dancers, and I know from talking to you that you also work with a lot of creatives in general.
Mhm.
What does psychology, what does your work have to do with circus arts? Where's the connection?
Yeah. Well, I mean, circus has a quality that I think is so resonant with the human spirit. It's so resonant for me when I watch it.
Hmm.
Um, there's a lot of dialectical tensions. There's both excellence and aliveness. The choreography is so highly structured, yet the form is spontaneous and ephemeral. It can be transgressive and wondrous all at the same time. Um, so I think that we are naturally drawn to these qualities. In a lot of the work I do with ballet dancers who have been doing this work and this form, many of them since they were really young children.
Hmm.
I think there's actually a tie into what we were talking about earlier, this process of learning and unlearning, where um, many of them learn, um, use certain helpful and unhelpful um, ways to push themselves to
Right.
become sort of these elite performers.
Hmm.
And I usually intersect with them during adolescence, during those high school years. And so I'm really interested in how can you keep doing what is working for you and aligns with your psychological well-being? And when are there ways that you've been relating to yourself that you feel really attached to because you have come so far in the work you're
Yeah.
doing, but maybe require a pivot so that you can have that longevity and sustainability as you have like a longer term career.
Yeah. Yeah.
And that I think is probably very true for circus performers as well.
Yeah. All right. So when you get to put on your clinician hat and talk to other clinicians of across multiple fields, um, what is one thing that we can that we tend to overlook that you want to highlight when it comes to our artist rehab and getting them back to everything they want to do? Is there something from the psychological perspective that you're like, this should be something you're paying attention to, or maybe this is a signal that you should be referring out?
Hmm. And to clarify, do you mean when
Yeah.
you say rehab, are you kind
Mm.
of talking about when a performer is injured?
Yeah, maybe if they're injured, I mean, it doesn't have to be rehab. Maybe they're coming back from a pregnancy, returning to training.
Right, returning to training. Um, well, something like an injury, um, something like a pregnancy. I mean, these can be hard initiations that can, um, I mean, we were talking earlier, I just had a foot surgery, right? I mean, that's like
Yeah.
a mini version, right? These can be kind of hard initiations that can be opportunities to shift the way we are engaging with ourselves and us as performers. So, from a mental health perspective, um, so much can come online. Um, from a mental health perspective, during the process of actual rehab,
Mhm.
one has to sometimes adopt a stance of gentleness with themselves, of
Yeah.
patience.
Hmm.
That can be really challenging when you're used to sort of pushing, pushing, pushing. Sometimes there can be a lot of anxiety that comes up with re-entry after an
Hmm.
injury. Um, it can be really daunting. Once we've kind of been out of practice of kind of training every day, it can be really daunting to return.
Yeah.
Um, and so I use a lot of um, tools borrowed from social anxiety treatment to help folks
Okay.
progressively expose themselves to re-entering after an injury if that's coming up. Um, but I think, I also imagine that sometimes an injury can spark performers to sort of do work that maybe also was there before to be done, but just there was no time. Like the blinders were on, things were moving forward. And so sometimes from a mental health perspective, there can be like deep work that happens during that time because it's kind of
Mhm.
creating this opening
Right. Yeah. Yeah.
space. Yeah.
Interesting. All right. What about you work with a lot of performing artists. For artists and coaches, what's something from the psychological world that they can take away to improve or change their training?
So for I guess two things jump to mind.
Yeah.
One is, I think it can be actually a really radical idea that the research shows that um, performance excellence and psychological well-being
Hmm.
are mutually reinforcing. So they should not be, one should not have to harm their psychological well-being in order to
I see where.
perform at the highest
Yeah.
level. And that's not always the message that
Right.
we pick up in our world.
Right. Yeah.
So, and I think so if you are, that can be kind of a radical idea. And
Mm.
then in terms of like coaches or clinicians, like knowing how to um really knowing um how do we pivot from self-criticism to self-compassion, which is performance enhancing, but also psychologically enhancing too. Like
Yeah.
we have to kind of know if there's something that's we're pushing towards that's not helping our mental health, but we think it's helping our performance, we have to have an alternative path. Like we can't just give the message, be well and be excellent without knowing how all of that is intertwined and how
Right.
people get there. And then I guess the other piece from psychology, maybe for coaches, maybe for performers, is a little bit of advocacy skills. I think that really,
Interesting.
having really healthy structural environments
Yeah.
um, makes it so much easier for performers to be like mentally well as they're doing their training. And so, coaches, performers, and even clinicians can gain some advocacy skills as well in order to make some subtle shifts that will improve the environment because we can't have all of the onus being on individual performers for things to be mental health enhancing.
I feel like those two things kind of go hand in hand. It's like, hey, the advocacy skills. Well, one, it's easier to advocate for yourself when you're in a healthy environment, but also advocating can help lead to a healthier environment. So you kind of got going both ways.
Yes, yes. And not to put even more pressure on the performers, I think that's, so many parts of those systems can kind of move things hopefully in a healthier environmental direction.
Absolutely. Awesome. Well, Laura, thank you so much for taking time to tell us a little bit more about your world, about how psychology intersects with performing arts.
Of course, it was so wonderful to talk to you, and I'm really excited about the upcoming symposium.
Excellent. Can't wait to have you and to learn more from you.
Oh, thanks.